Turning now to introduce our speaker, Boris Handal. He's a professor of learning technologies at the University of Notre Dame in Australia. He was also a visiting professor at the University of Alberta in Canada at one point. He's taught in schools and universities in South America, where he's originally from Peru, Asia and Australia as well. For over 35 years, he has been teaching. His publications comprise over 100 conference and journal papers, books, and book chapters published in the United States, Australia, Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. The book that he'll be talking about tonight is his book on Mírzá Mihdí, the son of Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the Baha'i faith. Mírzá Mihdí, or the Purest branch, tragically died when he was 19 years old, and his death is often considered a martyrdom for the faith. And his life was a pure and saintly life, as we will hear tonight. So I will now turn the program over to Boris. Boris, welcome to the Wilman Institute's Web Talks. Thank you so much for contributing to our series, and we look forward to hearing your presentation tonight.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning in Australia. Good evening in the United States. And muy buenas tardes a los amigos de Sudamérica que me están viendo. Next month, on the 23rd of June, 2020, marks the 150 years since Mírzá Mihdí died in the path of his glorious fathers in the city prison of Akká. Mírzá Mihdí was the beloved son of Baha'u'lláh, who fell from a skylight in the roof of a prison. His sacrifice is considered as a rescue for the liberation of Baha'u'lláh from the prison, and Baha'u'lláh referred him as the purest branch of Gosney at heart. In this talk, I'm going to cover several stages of his life. First of all, I'm going to talk about the Holy Family, then the 4 exiles to Baghdad, Istanbul, Edirne, and Akká, and then the journey from the Holy Family from Europe to the Holy Land. And finally, I will discuss the Mírzá Mihdí sacrifice, how they are related to the liberation of Baha'u'lláh from the prisons. My wife, Parveen, will help me reading the words of Baha'í Khánum. The members of the Holy Family were Nabab, Abdul Baha, Baha'í Khánum, and Mírzá Mihdí, with Baha'u'lláh as its head. Our story starts when 2 rich and noble families get together through the marriage of Baha'u'lláh and Nabab in October 1835. This is the wedding certificate. The material grandeur of Nabab's family, however, never exceeded her spiritual greatness, which gave her a special glow. His personal qualities were recognized by all: her beauty, her keen intelligence, her graceful charm, and virtuosity. Here we see Abdul Baha with Mírzá Mihdí. It has been said that Mírzá Mihdí was very similar to Abdul Baha, though a little taller and thinner. Baha'í Khánum was Mírzá Mihdí's sister, 2 years older than him. Most of what we know about Mírzá Mihdí come from her personal accounts, which may tell us about the love she had for him. Mírzá Mihdí saw the light of day sometimes in 1848 in a house near the Shemeran Gate, one of the main entrances to the city of Tehran. In that house, which still stands, Baha'u'lláh lived with his extended family, including his wife, mother, brother, and sisters, until his last day in Iran. What we are going to see next is some pictures regarding the house of Baha'u'lláh in Tehran. This is a view of Tehran in the 19th century, which tells us something about their daily life. You can see, for example, that there are more men than women on the streets. On the left-hand side, a person is punished with the bastinado, which was a very cruel punishment where the person's feet were hit with a stick. So this tells us something about the life in Tehran. Tehran city had 6 gates, which were closed at night. They used to be custom places, as well as police standpoints where people were checked on arrivals and departures. Shemiran is at the top right of the map. And this is Nasiruddin Shah, the Shah of Iran. His name means defender of the faith, but Baha'u'lláh called him the oppressor of the faith because of his cruel persecutions on the Baha'ís of Iran. In August 1852, an attain has been made on the life of the Shah by a half-crazy young Babi follower of the Bab. Because of this, and because of the teachings of the Bab that declared being a new messenger of God, the authorities, unwilling to accept these teachings, began to harass, persecute, and kill the early believers. In 1852, Baha'u'lláh was arrested and imprisoned under chains in one of the most horrible prisons of Tehran. This is another depiction of the dungeon called the Siyachal, the Black Pit. Most cities in Iran had a Siyachal, a black pit. Many of them have been destroyed due to the growth of the modern cities. Baha'u'llah's innocence on the attempt against the life of the Shah was proved. However, his family were exiled from Tehran and traveled to Baghdad during the snowy winter of early 1853 in a journey that took 3 months. However, because Mírzá Mihdí was very young and sick, he had to stay with his grandparents in Tehran. 4 exiles took the Holy Family to Baghdad, Istanbul, Edirne, and finally to Akká. Those extended exiles shows the family spiritual capacity to sustain the hardship of land and sea journeys with patience and meekness. Born in Tehran approximately in 1848, as we saw, Mírzá Mihdí was separated from his parents for about 7 years when they were exiled to Baghdad in 1852. Mírzá Mihdí joined his parents in Baghdad, as I said, about 7 years later. Baghdad is the capital of Iran. At that time, was the capital, was part of the Ottoman Empire. This is a photo of Baha'u'llah's house in Baghdad. Here you got more pictures about the house of Baha'u'lláh in Baghdad, which now has been destroyed. In Baghdad, the fame of Baha'u'llah's wisdom spread in all directions. People of every background crowded to his home, seeking his help and advice. The government was afraid of Baha'u'llah's influence and therefore decided to banish him even further away from his homeland. Abdulaziz, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, decided to banish Baha'u'lláh and his family from Baghdad to Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Before Baha'u'lláh left Baghdad, he withdrew with his family to a small garden in the middle of the Tigris River for 12 days. The garden was called the Garden of Rizwan. In the first day of a hot afternoon, Baha'u'lláh took with him his sons, Abdul Baha, 18 years old, and Mírzá Mihdí, 14 years old, and crossed the river to the garden. The rest of his family joined him on the 9th day once the high tide decreased. This is another view of the Garden of Rizwan. The Garden of Rizwan was destroyed when a new hospital was built in the area. Baha'u'lláh, during these 12 days, stayed on the garden, farewelling friends and believers. In the Garden of Rizwan, Baha'u'lláh declared his mission as the promised one of all religions. Here's a picture of the trip, the land and sea scenery when you go from Istanbul, from Baghdad to Istanbul. The trip took about 4 months. And this is a view of Istanbul in times of Baha'u'lláh. As you know, Istanbul was called formerly Constantinople and was the seat of the Ottoman Empire. Baha'u'lláh and his family stayed about 4 months in that city, and later on, the Sultan decided to exile them further away, this time to the city of Edirne. Edirne, also called Adrianople in the past, is situated in Europe, close to Bulgaria. And this is significant because this is the first time a manifestation of God lived in Europe. Edirne was inhabited mostly by Christians and was a place of exile for political enemies of the Sultan. So Edirne is approximately 200 kilometers away from Istanbul. During the land trip in the middle of winter, the Baha'is suffered intense cold, and they had to light bonfires to melt the ice from the springs in order to obtain water. The march through heavy rain and storms to the new place of exile continued even at night. Baha'u'lláh said, "Neither my family nor those who accompany me had the necessary raiment to protect them from the cold in that freezing weather." It was from Edirne that Baha'u'lláh addressed his historic and momentous summons to the kings and rulers of the earth. Mírzá Mihdí was a first-hand witness of those historical events, serving Baha'u'lláh at different capacities as he grew into adulthood, particularly being Baha'u'llah's secretary. This is a view of Baha'u'llah's house garden in Edirne. In Edirne, the Holy Family stayed about 4 years. Well, on July 1868, the Sultan of Turkey signed another edict banishing Baha'u'lláh, this time from Edirne to the prison of Akká. Baha'u'llah's families and group of Baha'is, including extended families with children, were prepared to go willingly with him and share his imprisonment. However, the final place of banishment was not disclosed to them at that time, but only later, when already at sea, on the way to Akká, they were told about the final destination. The group departed from Gallipoli in Turkey, from Alexandria in Egypt, before noon on 21st of August, 1868. Abdul Baha is reported to have said that they put us on board on the ship and made us most of the passage money. There were not even time to buy food for the trip. The steam ships would navigate day and night, accompanied by the monotonous sound of the paddle wheel, through the water and occasional whistles, sirens, and bells. While the privileged were hosted in elegant staterooms with all facilities and top quality food and drinks, passengers in the lower classes were accommodated in cramped compartments with bunk beds that also served as lounge rooms. They ate on long tables and shared filthy amenities, sometimes plagued with insects and even rats. And you hear the sound, the typical sound of steamship on that time. The vessel arrived in Mytilene on the Greek island of Evos by sunset, and later in this evening left for Smyrna, where the exile stayed for 2 days. And this is Smyrna in Greece, where one of the believers, the nave Monique, became very sick. The captain insisted that he had to leave the ship. Therefore, he was taken to the hospital in Smyrna, where he died. The believers were allowed to be with him for only 1 hour. This is Smyrna, which is now part of Turkey. They arrived in Alexandria, an important regional port, situated on the Nile Delta 2 days later in the morning. In Alexandria, the group was transferred to another Austrian Lloyd steamer. At Port Said on the Suez Canal, the ship arrived the next morning, anchoring during the day and leaving at night. The steamship then proceeded, making another brief stop at Jaffa, a port located next to Tel Aviv, arriving there by sunset of the next day. From Jaffa, the vessel continued to Haifa, which was reached the following morning. Bahá'u'lláh Khánum recalled.
After a voyage of about 2 days, we were landed at Haifa in Syria. All were sick from hunger or eating improper food. I myself was a healthy woman up to the time of taking this voyage. Since then, I have never been well. We had to be carried ashore in chairs. We remained 1 day in the prison at Haifa and the men in chains.
After waiting in Haifa for a few hours, Baha'u'lláh and his companions were taken to Akká on a sailing ship provided by the authorities. The 16 kilometers sea journey took 8 hours and was very arduous owing to the rough waters, a lack of wind to propel the vessel, a lack of provisions, and a lack of shelter from the blistering sun, disembarking in Akká by the 4 p.m. on the 31st of August, 1868. Akká, the most great prison, as Baha'u'lláh called it, was the place where all the prophecies from past religions regarding the promised one were fulfilled. The tongues of the prophet of Israel had acclaimed the city, conferring upon it a special position in the course of human history. David, in the Bible, had said, "Lift up your heads, your gates, be lifted up, your ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in." Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. The whole trip from Edirne, by land and by sea, took about 3 weeks, which was much hardship, and they were treated like state prisoners. They were exhausted after an 11-sea journey on 3 different vessels, and they were received and taken immediately with hostility with 30 soldiers to the local barracks. The group disembarked to be taken to an abandoned and dilapidated fortress barracks amid a harsh reception from the Akká population, who called Baha'u'lláh as the god of the Persians. Bahá'u'lláh Khánum related.
The governor ordered that the women be carried on the back of the men. My brother Abdul Baha was not willing that this should be done and protested against it. He was one of the first to land and procured a chair in which, with the help of other believers, he carried the women ashore. The Blessed Perfection was not allowed to have this boat until all his family has been landed. When he came to the shore, the family were counted and taken to the army barracks, in which we were all imprisoned. From the terrible suffering and privation of the journey, we were nearly all sick. Worst of all, perhaps the Blessed Perfection and myself.
Notwithstanding the distance, it must have been a difficult walk from the port to the barracks. The exiles were exhausted after this 19-day journey. They had to take on the walk their personal belongings and carry the children who were mostly tired, hungry, and thirsty more than the adults themselves. During the walk to the prison, the crowd on the street threw insults at them. There was a line of soldiers from the shore to the barracks. Not knowing where they were taking that hot afternoon, the long walk must have seemed interminable until they finally saw the bleak walls of the fortress, and with their last ounce of energy, climbed the high steps leading to the final destination, where they stayed 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. First of all, the women were taken up and locked in a room. Then the men were treated likewise. And this is a picture inside the citadel. The moment Baha'u'lláh stepped into the citadel, he stopped and pointed to all who were with him about the exalted position they now occupied. Baha'u'lláh reminded that thereafter their life would take another form and would have a deeper significance. Even, Baha'u'lláh said, a brief breath in that atmosphere and a step taken along that path would be immortalized. Baha'u'lláh then saw a broken branch near his feet. He looked at it and said that even that broken twig would be mentioned in East and West. Then Baha'u'lláh demanded from his family and followers an unswerving rectitude of character and an unflinching devotion to the cause of God, so that all their words and deed will become worthy of eternity. Regarding Baha'u'llah's arrival to Akká, the Universal House of Justice wrote that at that event, the sun of His Majesty had reached its zenith. On the next slide, we are going to see what Akká looked like from a bird view. In the following slides, we will look at life in the barracks. Great and memorable events took place at the most great prison, such as the universal proclamations of Baha'u'llah's faith to all mankind and the consummation of long anticipated prophecies regarding the promised one. Baha'u'llah said, "From the foundation of the world until the present day, a cruelty such as this has neither been seen nor heard of." Asíyih Khánum said,
Arrived at Barracks, it was proposed to put the Blessed Perfection and his family on the second floor, and he was sent up. But I fainted from exhaustion and was unable to ascend the stairs. When we had entered the barracks, the massive door was closed upon us and the great iron bolt thrown home. I can't find words to describe the filth and stench of that vile place. We were nearly up to our ankle in mud in the room into which we were led. The damp, close air and the excretions of the soldiers combined to produce horrible odors. Then, being unable to bear more, I fainted. As I fainted, those about me caught me before I fell. But because of the mud and filth, there was no place upon which I could be led. On one side of the room was a mat waving a mat for the soldiers. One of our friends took this mat and I was placed upon it. They begged for water, but they couldn't get it. The soldiers would permit no one to go out. This was a pool of water on the dirt floor, in which the mat maker had been moisturizing his rasha. Some of this water was dipped upon and strained and then put on my lips. I swallowed a little and revived, but the water was so foul that my stomach rejected it, and I fainted again. Then a little of this water was thrown into my face, and at length I revived, suffering to go upstairs. Then came another time of heart-sickening suffering. The mothers who had babies at breast had no milk for them, for lack of food and drink, so the babies could not be pacified or quieted. The largest children were screaming and food for water and couldn't sleep or be soothed. And the women were fainting. Under this condition, my brother Abdul Baha spent the first part of the night in passing about among the distressed people, trying to pacify them and in appealing to the soldier not to be so heartless as to allow women and children to suffer so. About midnight, he succeeded in getting a message to the governor. We were then sent a little water and some cooked rice. But the latter was so full of grit and smelled so badly that one of the strong stomach could not retain it. The water children drank, but the rice only the stronger one could do. Later on, some of our people, in unpacking their goods, found some pieces of the bread which they had brought from Gallipoli and a little sugar. With these, a dish was prepared for the Blessed Perfection, who at this time was very ill. When it was taken to him, he said, I command you to take this to the children. So it was given to them, and they were somehow quieted. The next morning, conditions were not better. There was neither water nor food that could be eaten. My brother sent message after message to the governor, appealing in behalf of the women and children. At length, he sent us water and some prisoner bread. But the latter was worse even than the rice. Appearing and tasting as though earth had been mixed with the flour. My brother also succeeded in getting permission to send out a servant guarded by 4 soldiers to buy food. The servant selected was told that if he spoke to a man or woman, except for bargaining or supplies, he would be spit on the sword of the soldier.
Here you see another view of the prison at the time of Baha'u'lláh. Baha'u'lláh was first placed in a completely empty cell, but later on was put into a room whose floor was covered with earth and whose ceiling was peeling off continuously, falling onto the floor. With no bed, sleeping on a few mats laid on the cold stone slab floor, this must have been a torturous experience for Baha'u'lláh. They stayed in those barracks for 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days.
Just imagine stepping into mud.
These are the 2 windows on the right that Baha'u'lláh would wave from to the pilgrims.
In this video, you will see what the barracks look inside.
This was all water.
Eventually, the conditions were released. Maybe have reduced it back a lot because they could use this area as well.
Here we have a view of the public bath. For 3 months, Baha'u'lláh was not allowed to go to the public bath. The barber attending him in the prison was not allowed to talk to him and was constantly watched by a guard. So bad were the unhealthy conditions in the middle of that summer, 1868, with malaria, typhoid, and dysentery widespread, that 3 of the exiles died. Baha'u'lláh then revealed a special healing prayer, and the illnesses stopped. Despite this condition, the Baha'is succeeded spiritually and converted the misery of the barracks into a space of spirituality and joy, because they knew that living next to the manifestation of God was the utmost blessing. The prison guards, first-hand witnesses of the exiles' spiritual qualities, gradually became more benign and sympathetic towards the group. It's known, for example, that Colonel Ahmad Jarrah, commander of the barracks, eventually became a Baha'i, as did his brother, a government officer. From his cell, Baha'u'lláh wrote to 5 powerful monarchs of that time, calling them to recognize the great day of God. Their names were Queen Victoria, Queen of Great Britain, and Queen Empress of India, Prime Minister of Turkey, Ali Pasha, Tsar Alexander, Emperor of Russia, Napoleon II, Emperor of the French, and Pope Pio IX, head of the Catholic Church. It's during these 4 exiles that Mírzá Mihdí showed the magnanimity of his soul. And these are some tributes that were paid to his.
He was the purest branch.
First of all, let's have
that
let's hear
ever garden grew,
this song sung by
that
Grant
ever
Henry
orchard
Miller
knew.
about Mírzá Mihdí.
the dawning of a light. He was the purest branch, a flower in the sun, a vision from the heart, a mystery to us. From a cradle to a carriage, from a playpen to a prison, just a child, just a child. In the cold and snow of winter, in the chilly winds of hunger, every trial, every trial. He was the purest branch that ever hill did find, that ever spring did shine, that ever kissed the sky.
This is another testimony about Mírzá Mihdí meekness that you can read off the screen. In many of these testimonies, you can see that meekness was the most predominant quality in the life of the purest band. For example, Baha'u'lláh said, I testify that deeds return in meekness unto time above. But what is meekness? According to the Bible dictionary, meekness is an active and deliberate acceptance on undesirable circumstances that are wisely seen by the individual as solely part of a larger picture. And you can see another testimony, this time from one of the exiles, about Mírzá Mihdí being a pillar of the strength among the imprisoned Baha'ís. That when Baha'u'lláh revealed a tablet and Mírzá Mihdí has copied down this tablet, he went and shared this news with the friends. Another testimony about Mírzá Mihdí's modest and self-effacing disposition. Here, more testimonies about the spiritual beauty of Mírzá Mihdí. And this is from Bahá'ís Khánum, his sister, saying that Mírzá Mihdí got a very gentle and sweet disposition. Because Mírzá Mihdí ultimately sacrificed his life that others may attain the presence of the manifestation of God, and also to bring unity of the world. Mírzá Mihdí was the secretary of Baha'u'lláh. When Baha'u'lláh was writing his tablets, or sometimes he was dictating to Mírzá Mihdí, and then he would, Abdul-Wahab will copy them. And the problem was how to take these tablets out of the prison, because when the Baha'i went in and out of the prison, they were totally body searched. So they were virtually totally uncommunicated. So they found a way through a physician, a Greek physician. And the physician was Dr. Boutros. Dr. Boutros means Peter in Greek. And he used to take the tablets hidden in the lining of his hat. According to Baha'í Khánum,
the physician who visited my brother on seeing our condition had so much sympathy with our distress and became so fond of Abbas Effendi that he asked him if there was not something which he could do for us. My brother begged him to take a message to the believers who were waiting to hear from the Blessed Perfection. He undertook to do so and carried a tablet in the lining of his hat. For 2 years, this physician conveyed tablets and messages to and from for us in this way.
Now let's talk about the first Baha'i pilgrims. Soon the Baha'is of Iran began to undertake the long journey to Akká to visit their beloved. Baha'u'lláh lamented of being separated from his loved ones. He said, "Later we entered this prison, where in the hand of our beloved ones were torn from the hem of our robe." Drawn like a magnet, the Persian believers slowly began to travel to Akká to reach the presence of Baha'u'lláh through different routes involved in Turkey, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. These pilgrims entered Akká through the land gate, which was the only gate to get into this city. This gate was closed at night. In a time when going to foreign countries was not the norm, with little infrastructure to facilitate international movements, including the constant danger of highwaymen and long and tiring journeys where sometimes people perished, these Iranian devotees left everything behind, families and jobs, and set out to the Holy Land. They can only wander around the street of Akká, looking for some trace leading to some Persian Baha'is. They were very afraid of being identified because immediately they were going to be expelled from the city. Or sometimes they had to walk around the local market looking for asylum. Some others, like Nabil and Badi, encountered Baha'is in the mosque, pretending they were going to pray. These early pilgrims were looking for ways to get into the barracks. This is a plane of Akká from Baha'u'llah's prison windows. That's the look that they had looking at the pilgrims outside the walls. When the Baha'i pilgrims were at the prison in the outer walls, the family would bring Baha'u'lláh into another cells, which are the third and the second window from the left, so that he could wave his hand or handkerchief at the friends. Only to realize that the only thing they could see from the Blessed Beauty was a distant and vague glimpse of his face as he waved a handkerchief through the prison windows. What we are going to see now is a view of the inside the barracks. Inside the barracks, this is the place where eventually Mírzá Mihdí fell from the roof in the prison. This is the area where the ladies of the household used to stay and sit. As you can see from this view is the stairs to the top floor. This is the entrance to the cells, they call it the dorms inside the barracks, where the Holy Family stayed. On this side, you will see this little room where Baha'u'lláh met some authorities that wanted to meet him. It used to be an open area. There were no these walls. It was sort of balconies open to the courtyard. So it's a window from which Baha'u'lláh used to wave at pilgrims. The window bars were put after the Holy Family left the barracks. This is another window from which Baha'u'lláh waved to pilgrims. Another view from the windows looking at the place where the pilgrims used to stand and gaze at the prison. Another view from the prison. This is another view from the prison looking at where the pilgrims stood. The pilgrims stood at one of the outer walls. Let's quickly review some early pilgrims. But before, let's have a commercial break. If you want more information and learn more about Mírzá Mihdí, you can buy the book Mírzá Mihdí The Purest branch through Amazon.com. In this picture, you can see at the left of the outer wall of the moat, there is a green area. There's an arrow, small arrow on the left side showing a green area. And there was a little hill which the pilgrims used as a lookout. And the distance from Baha'u'llah's cells to this lookout was about 100 meters. Nabil Assam was one of the early pilgrims. We know he's one of the great historians of the Baha'i faith. But he was looking with great sorrow at the prisons, looking for a sign. And he said that one day, as he was walking on the walls surrounding the fort, Nabil suddenly noticed Baha'u'llah, who through the windows of the prison was extending his hand and expressing his love for him. Eventually, Nabil was summoned to the prison and stayed 81 days with Baha'u'lláh. As I said, there were some covenant breakers who had a house at the city gate. And from this position, they act as spies for the government, as they were familiar for who were the Baha'is. After Nabil arrived to the city, he was identified and reported, and therefore Nabil was expelled from the city. According to Nabil, my disguise of dervish allowed me to enter the city and question. I wandered around in perplexity, for I didn't dare to ask for information as to where the Baha'is were. Fatigue was beginning to overwhelm me. At length, I went to the mosque, where I found a sheikh who lived nearby. I discovered that he was a Baha'i. Allahu Akbar. When he knew of my journey and of my aim, he said, "Stay here with me. Abdul Baha will come when it's evening time." Then from the mosque came our beloved master. Badi was another early pilgrim to Akká. In early 1869, he was dressed carrying the skins of a water carrier, disguised to get into the prison. He wasn't detected, but not knowing anyone to ask for more information and in fear of being identified, Badi wanders through the tortuous Akká street looking for clues that would lead him to the Baha'is exiles. He headed to the mosque to pray and release the burden of his heart, when suddenly, at sunset, he saw Abdul Baha and a group of Baha'is. Badi recognized them, and without anyone noticing, gave the master a piece of paper, identifying himself in a two-line poem as a believer. The same night, through the efforts of Abdul Baha, Badi attained Baha'u'llah's presence. And we know that Baha'u'lláh accepted Badi's request to take the tablet to the Shah. Since it wasn't safe for Badi to take the tablet out of Akká, Baha'u'lláh told him to go to Haifa and wait. There, a believer handed Badi the tablet, and he set out for Tehran at once. Badi and Mírzá Mihdí were almost of the same age, and therefore the encounter must have been special. After 4 months, Badi arrived in Tehran, was intercepted by the Shah and tortured and put to death in June 1869. The first of the pilgrims to meet Baha'u'lláh was in the prison walls was, however, Abul Hassan Ardegani. He was able to see Baha'u'lláh only in the public bath in a carefully arranged meeting. He was asked not to give any sign of being a Baha'i or to approach Baha'u'lláh. He said that when his eyes fell upon his Lord, he fell to the ground unconscious, overcome by emotion. Another pilgrim was Abdul Rahim. Abdul Rahim approached the prison and began to circumambulate it. Then, to his surprise, he noticed that Baha'u'llah's hand from a window of the prison was telling him to come inside. He rushed to the gate of the prison, which was guarded by soldiers. But the soldiers seemed to him to be motionless and not to see him. Baha'u'lláh told him that he had temporarily blinded the eyes of the guards so that he might attain his presence. Nabil Akbar was another early pilgrim. According to Abdul Baha, most of the time his food was bread, nothing else. Instead of tea, he drank from a running brook. Still, he remained happy and content. Ustad Ismail as another pilgrim. He was short of sight and stayed gazing the prison window for several hours, an incident that made the Holy Family to cry, being anxiously watching from afar the frustration of his hopes. Now let's go now through Mírzá Mihdí's ultimate sacrifice. One hot afternoon, Mírzá Mihdí was occupied with his devotions on the roof, and afterward went, as always, to Baha'u'llah's chamber to fulfill his usual secretarial duties. Because he didn't feel well, it was suggested that he return to the roof. Several other Baha'i prisoners were also unwell. It seems that Baha'u'lláh told Mírzá Mihdí, "I will not meet you tonight." Mirzá's sacrifice, the accident, took place on the 22nd of June, 1969. 1970. Mírzá Mihdí went up the narrow stairs and began his devotions, walking to and from across the roof. Absorbed in his meditations and invocations, raising and lowering his head, he knew the number of steps that should be taken to avoid falling through the unguarded skylight that provided light and ventilation to the floor 10 meters below. At twilight, as darkness began to fall over the horizon of the Mediterranean Sea, Mírzá Mihdí was still observing his devotions on the prison roof. He was reciting the poignant passages of the Ode of the Dove. Mírzá Mihdí was captivated by the tone of deep distress in the words of his father. The next video will show you a view of Akká from the roof of the prison. He was reciting the poignant passage of the Ode of the Dove, written when Baha'u'lláh had retired to the mountains of Soleimaniyeh, in which Baha'u'lláh speaks of his grief and suffering. Noah's flood is but the measure of the tears I have shed, Abraham's fire and ebullition of my soul. Jacob's grief is but a reflection of my sorrow, and Job's affliction a fraction of my calamity. Without realizing it, being in a state of prayer, he stumbled, lost his balance, and fell through the open skylight into the wooden crate, standing on the floor beneath. He fell into the area used as a living room near the kitchen. No one was there at that time. The sound of the impact and the groans of the purest branch immediately drew the attention of those who were nearby. They rushed to see what happened. All were shocked and frightened by the scene. They barely believed what they saw. The wooden crate and shatter and splinters were embedded in Mírzá Mihdí's ribs and thigh, to the extent that it was impossible to remove his clothes, which latter had to be torn from him. Nawab, Mírzá Mihdí's mother, frail and weeping, also went to her son's side as he lay below the open skylight. Seeing her son soaking blood, she was plunged into an agonizing anguish and fainted away. Mírzá Mihdí took her in his arms to console her. Baha'u'lláh and Nawab heard the noise, and Baha'u'lláh said, "That's my Mihdí. He has been sacrificed." They went out, and he was lying on the floor with his bones broken. They carried him to a room and put him on a couch. An Italian doctor was called, but Mírzá Mihdí's injuries were so serious that he couldn't do much for him. Nor was there a hospital in Akká. In the midst of his overwhelming pain, Mírzá Mihdí's nobility was clear to all, as he apologized to those who came near to his bedside. So distressed was Abdul Baha that he entered the presence of Baha'u'lláh, kneeled at his feet, and implored him to heal his young brother. Baha'u'llah's response was, "O my greatest branch, leave him in the hand of God." The Blessed Perfection went to Mírzá Mihdí's room, and for a long time they went alone. When offered his life by Baha'u'lláh, Mírzá Mihdí chose instead to sacrifice it, so that the doors of the prison may open and those who long to see Baha'u'lláh attain their desire. The next day, Mírzá Mihdí asked to meet the believers, whom he received with the utmost love and kindness. However, so serious were his injuries that death took him away that evening. The agony of the purest branch lasted for 22 hours. On Thursday, 23rd of June, 1870, he passed away when he was 22 years old. The following day, the body of Mírzá Mihdí was washed in the courtyard of the barracks before the eyes of Baha'u'lláh. These words of Baha'u'lláh reflect the poignancy of that day. "I offer him up, O my God, as a sacrifice in thy path. thou well knowest what they who lofty have endured through this trial, and has caused the kindred of the earth to wail, and beyond them the conquerors on high to lament. Thereat have the dwellers of the tabernacle wept with a great weeping. As such, I have suffered imprisonment with this youth in the path of God, the Lord of the promised ones, lamented. Baha'u'llah's only rug has to be sold to buy a coffin. The body was carried out by the jailers, and the family did not even know where it was taken, because they were not allowed to get out of the prison and accompany the coffin. Mírzá Mihdí's body was interred in the Nabi Saleh cemetery outside the fortress, about 1 kilometer away from the fortress. It was the old cemetery. Eventually, this headstone was put on his grave, on his resting place, and this headstone still can be seen in the mansion of Ajib for display. Interestingly, Baha'u'llah said that when Mírzá Mihdí died, or he was being interred, there was an earthquake. And there is a record from a local geophysics station showing that on the 24th of June, 1870, there were at least 3 squares in the evening, confirming Baha'u'llah's word. Soon after Mírzá Mihdí's sacrifice, conditions in the prison were relaxed. And then the conditions were relaxed, and the Baha'is were allowed and leave the barracks. That was in November 1870. So therefore, Mírzá Mihdí's wish was fulfilled. A tense international situation with Russia caused the Turkish government to reorganize its army, making necessary to once again use the barracks as an army facility. The prison doors were opened after the passing of the Purest branch, and the pilgrims were given more access to the manifestation of God. This prayer from Baha'u'llah elevated Mírzá Mihdí's sacrifice to the great redemptive sacrifices in religious history. I have, O my Lord, offered up that which thou hast given me, that my servants may be quickened, and all that dwell on earth be united. Redemption is one of the central themes in every dispensation. Baha'u'llah exalted Mírzá Mihdí's sacrifice through the great acts of redemption associated with Abraham's sacrifice, intended sacrifice of his son, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the martyrdom of the Imam Hussein, and as Shoghi Effendi said, also with the martyrdom of the mob. It's beautiful now that in these days, believers from all over the world pray freely, and the Mírzá Mihdí's accidents place. Mírzá Mihdí's grave on Mount Carmel, along with those of his sister Bahá'í Khánum, his mother Nawab, and Abdul Bahá's wife, constitute the focal center of the Bahá'í administrative institution of the faith in the Holy Land. You can see these 4 resting places at the top, middle, and right side of the screen of the ark on Mount Carmel. In December 1939, Shoghi Effendi moved the bodies of Nawab and Mírzá Mihdí to a beautiful tomb in Mount Carmel that we saw in the earliest slide. And these are the 2 mausoleums erected by Shoghi Effendi to Nawab and Mírzá Mihdí. And this is Mírzá Mihdí grave. And this is a prayer for Baha'u'lláh to those who visited his resting place. Blessed art thou, and blessed he that turned unto thee, and visited thy grave, and drave nigh through thee unto God, the Lord of all that was and shall be. Shoghi Effendi also put a beautiful bronze plaque. And that's all, friends. A complete online course on Mírzá Mihdí will be running at the Wilmer Institute, as Rob already said. Will commence on next week, Thursday, 14th of May. And registrations are at the Wilmer Institute website, which is shown on the screen. Now, I think it's the time for comment and questions. But if you would like to send me an email, that's my email. Thank you very much for listening. Question from one participant, how did Mírzá Mihdí stay when he was left behind in Baghdad? He would stay with his, there are different sources. One is he stayed with his maternal grandmother, another with his auntie. At least three people are mentioned that look after Mírzá Mihdí in Tehran. What does this mean? It's an interesting question. What does this mean that all the world will be united through Mírzá Mihdí? Means that this is a promise, it's a Baha'u'llah's promise. And it means that that part of the promise hasn't been fulfilled. So therefore, through remembering Mírzá Mihdí and remember Baha'u'llah's promise, therefore, we are aware that we are still in the process of fulfilling that Baha'u'llah's prophecy about the unity of the world, and that Mírzá Mihdí was an important part of that prophecy. He was the engine of that prophecy, if you can use that word. So Mírzá Mihdí sacrifice is still current and will be current till the whole world is united.
We have a question in the question and answer section here about whether Nawab wrote anything about the loss of her son.
Not that I know. I don't know that I am aware. From what we have from Nawab is only individual letters, which are in the International Archive. I don't have fully knowledge of that issue. It's a matter, but not to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And
sorry.
John asked a question. The gates of Baha'u'llah's prison were flung open after Mehdi's ascension. How did the officials in Akká respond to? In other words, what are the specifics of why they relaxed the policy on visitors?
The specifics were that after the sacrifice, there is a story that one of the soldiers he saw Mírzá Mihdí's accident, and he actually heard Baha'u'lláh asking Mírzá Mihdí, do you want to live or do you want to die? What is that you wish? And this soldier also heard that the Mírzá Mihdí said, I want to die as a sacrifice, so the pilgrims attain the presence of Baha'u'lláh. So this soldier went and told that story to the governor. And this may have influenced the governor's heart, softened his heart, because Baha'u'lláh was under life imprisonment. That is, life imprisonment is life prison for life. So this incident softened, and at the same time there was a recognition that these prisoners were nice people. You see, for example, Abdul Baha treated medically the guards of the prison who were dying out of malaria. So these people are nice people. They behave very well. They say prayers. So there was a recognition, and little by little, the Baha'is were allowed to go out, for example, to buy food, right? And then the conditions were a bit more relaxed after a while. But still, the order of the Sultan was, and that came from the Sultan, they have to stay inside the barracks.
Of course, once they were forced to leave the barracks because the army needed it, they were then in a rented house. And that undoubtedly would have helped the situation as well, because they were, after all, in a house in the city, and it's a little freer to be in a house.
That's right.
Yeah.
One wonders what was the cause of the war between Turkey and Russia, but it's something that probably had to happen. So the barracks had to be emptied.
Well, could we clarify the date of the passing of Mírzá Mihdí? Because when you got to it, you mentioned 1917, which was the date of the photograph, and then you mentioned some other date, and then you mentioned 1969. Let's make sure that we have that date clear for everybody.
Sorry, that was a typo on the slide. It's 1870.
1870.
So the accident happened on the 22nd of June, which was, I believe, a Wednesday. So he died. The accident happened at sunset, twilight, right? So let's say 6-7 o'clock at night, and he passed away 22 hours later. Means, I guess 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock on the Thursday, the 23rd. He passed away on the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't know when he was. When was the burial? Because there is no sources that say where was the burial. We know that his body was washed and taken away from the prison. But if we look at the earthquake record, very helpful, it says that the earthquake that happened during the burial was on this 24th. So therefore, it's logically to assume that Mírzá Mihdí died, accident happened on the 22nd, he passed away on the 23rd, and he was buried on the 24th, 1870, June 1870.
And it was quite common for burials to occur 24 hours later. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Not really, because in the Muslim world, not that the Baha'u'llah was a Muslim, but the custom is that they tend to bury the body as soon as possible.
Right.
But what's interesting that with Mírzá Mihdí burial, it that happened in a coffin. So Muslims were not buried in coffin; they were just wrapped in some type of fabric. But Mírzá Mihdí was buried not in that, was in a proper coffin.
Mr. Foroughi says, I sometimes wonder if the purist branch had not had the tragic accident and had lived, the Baha'i world may have had another personage such as Abu Baha. Are there any writings of the purist branch?
No, we know that Mírzá Mihdí was the second oldest son of Baha'u'llah. First of all, Abdul Baha, then Mírzá Mihdí, and then the others. But there is no writings that I am aware. People can speculate, but there is no really something in writing. But he was the second son after Abdul Baha.
One person asked, where can we find the prayers that Baha'u'llah revealed regarding Mírzá Mihdí?
In my book. It's not in my book. There are in different sources. It's in the reference. I think it's Messages to America. In the book is Message to America. I don't have the reference right now.
Might be in the Baha'i world. There might be
of course,
the Baha'i world also for 1970.
Yeah, they are there, of course, in the Baha'i World Center. But if recently the book has been translated into Persian language, we take great care to translate the exact words from English, because the exact words were in the words that we used were from Chogi Effendi's words. He translated for us. But then we had to, the team of translators, we had to find the original words in Persian and Arabic. So hopefully the book will be ready. But if you have a particular query, you can send me an email and I can send you the Persian Arabic original text.
Good.
I can send you in English as well. I can also send you in English.
Yeah. Sally asks, what was the meaning of his name?
Mírzá Mihdí. Mírzá Mihdí means one who is guided.
Mihdí, yes, that's true.
In the Arabic pronunciation is Mahdi. So the Islamic world were asking where the promised one was called the Imam Mahdi, the one who will rise and will guide people.
Yeah, and Mírzá is just a title.
That's right.
Yeah. Let's see. The Mahzib asks, thank you for your great presentation and explanation. The course that will start on the 14th, what would it cover, and what would be the difference between it and the presentation that you've just given?
There's going to be more information, of course. You will have will be based on the book and other sources, but you will basically go through the whole book, or most of the book, where there are plenty of details that I couldn't put in the PowerPoint because it's too much restriction in terms of space.
It's really marvelous to hear all these stories about the pilgrims too. That I really appreciated that very much. I had not ever heard. I probably had heard these details, but had not actually put them in the right time frame. You know, so this I thought was very helpful.
Well, now it's very simple. Now it's very simple. You just book your flights, your hotel, and everything is fine. You feel comfortable. Everyone treats you nicely, well received, smiles. And then you come back. You got sick there. You got medical services, hospitals. Everything is clean. But 100 years ago, 150 years ago, actually, because it's 150 years of this. Yeah. Mírzá Mihdí sacrifice, things were totally different.
Yeah, the Akká didn't have water.
Didn't have water, and the early pilgrims, they had to live in cave. Mount Carmel, they live in cave. They will live in small towns. They have to start small trades to survive, and then from time to time come to Akká and see Baha'u'llahs waving from the prison. Then they were happy and try different ways to get into the barrack themselves. It was a difficult exercise, both for Baha'u'lláh himself, because he was a prisoner, and for the pilgrims who were sort of illegal travelers, you know. So this matching of how to get into the prison was a whole exercise. For example, some of the pilgrims, they have to climb the walls with ropes. They have to climb the walls with ropes to get into the prison. So they did everything they had. There is a story of one of the sheikhs in Akká that he became a Baha'i. After being very hostile, he became a Baha'i and in love with Baha'u'lláh. So therefore, he had access to the barracks because he was a sort of authority. He could get in and out. He was a local of there. So the way he used to take pilgrims inside the barracks, he used to go with a lantern outside the barracks at night, and then give the lantern to the pilgrim and ask the pilgrim to act like his servant. Mm-hmm. So the servant walk in front of this sheikh, like in the pathway, and that's how the sheikh managed to get the Baha'is into the prison. So the guards thought it's my servant, you see. So they were probably very creative getting to.
It's amazing.
They were dying times.
That's amazing. Let's see. One person asks, Dariush asks, do we know much about Mírzá Mihdí's journey to Baghdad to be reunited with his family?
Not really. We know that he was brought to, that one member of the family went back to Iran, a member of the family who was not in the edict, and that person brought Mírzá Mihdí to Baghdad, but no details.
Mm-hmm. One person asks, Thomas asks, in Baha'i history, are there other such examples of sacrifice?
Well, after Mírzá Mihdí, we got 20,000 examples. So, but if you want to start, and you buy the book and join the course, you start with Mírzá Mihdí, and then you can go to Badi. And also in the book, there are many other examples of sacrifice put into a context, so in the context of the story.
Aurora asks, why were bars put up on the windows after the Baha'is left?
Sorry, again, please.
Why were bars put on the windows why were they put there after Baha'u'lláh and the family left?
Yeah, in time of Baha'u'lláh, there were no, because this barracks was a place where the soldiers used to stay. So there were no war, and therefore the barracks were totally empty, were dilapidated, abandoned. Probably there were only a few soldiers there. So what's happening is that at the beginning of the 19th century, 20th century, when the Baha'i had already left the prison, because they left the prison in 1870, say 40 years later, the barracks were used as a prison, normal prison.
Right, by the British.
Yes, so therefore they put bars. But the bars were not initially in the barracks. Yeah,
they put a bunch of not Israeli. This is before Israel. They put a bunch of Jewish prisoners in there in the exact same spot because they were causing incidents against the British rule over Palestine.
Right.
That's right. Merat Bagah says, this is very interesting. I recall a physician was requested. Well, you mentioned that. Did one attend him? My guess is that he passed away from pneumothorax, collapsed lung, which would have been treatable given proper care. I realize that this is a mystical sacrifice, and that's sounds like a good guess.
Yeah. What I put on the slide and a bit more information on the book is all what we know about his physical condition. There are no records, and there are no records who was that doctor, because Dr. Boutros, the Greek doctor, this Arabic Greek doctor, he was the one who saw regularly the Holy Family, and brought and took away the tablets. But when Mírzá Mihdí's accident happens, they call an Italian doctor. So he is probably a different person. It was not a Greek doctor. Or maybe that the Greek doctor, they mix up and say Italian and Greek are the same. Because there were no really Italians there. Mm-hmm. So I did some research on the Dr. Boutros. We're trying to find who was he. It's difficult to find him because we look at the historical records of Akká, but there was no indication of a Greek doctors. The Greek doctors were part of the Christian Greek denomination, the Catholic Greeks. There were two denominations. So there were no really Greek. There were Arabs that followed the Christian Greek tradition, religion. They were fluent in Arabic. They probably were born in Palestine, but it's getting a bit elusive to find who he was. Mm-hmm. There are only 4 times that he's mentioned in the history as coming and seeing the Baha'is. But all we know, he was Greek. His name was Dr. Boutros, and he was very friendly with the Baha'is.
Farah asks, can we find the accounts from Asíyih Khánum?
There are in different sources. There are different. One is The Chosen Highway by Lady Blomfield, and the other book is I have to look at the references. But if you buy the book from Amazon, the ebook is only $9. You get all the information there. It's an ebook, $9. You can download it directly to your iPad. Look, a bit of a salesman, isn't it?
Neda says, who are the children that were present? And where's the rest of it? Who were the children?
Present during the accident?
In the prison. And how old were they? Remember, you mentioned children were crying at the beginning when they were first put into the prison because there's no water.
Roughly 1/3 were men, 1/3 were women, and 1/3 were children. And the children, some of them were very, very young, 2-3 months old. Some of them were 2-3 months old, and they were in all the range, 4, 8, 7, up to higher.
There were 30 or 40 people in the party. Do you remember how many?
67.
67. Okay, yeah.
67.
67.
So
large party.
If you look at the book by Mr. Baljousi, Baha'u'lláh, the King of Glory, he details the names, and he said who were a woman, a child, and so on. So, because the Sultan exile Farman, the order, was only for 5 Baha'ís, Baha'u'lláh, Mírzá Musa, Mishkin Kalan, and 2 other people. But was very curious that at the end, 67 went on the ship, because these 67 were voluntarily, willingly, they wanted to go, and the authority said that you cannot go. You are going to a prison. Said, yes, we want to go to a prison. We want to go with Baha'u'lláh. So actually, only 5 people were legally binded to. But at the end, all Baha'i said, we cannot live without Baha'u'lláh. We are going all together. And that's why they have children and women there.
What were your sources that you drew on for the book?
A lot of sources. You have to see it in the, it's a long bibliography. It's a long bibliography. So, and some information came from the Holy Land as well, and so on. Some clarification was sought from the research department at the World Center, for which I am very thankful, to enrich the history. So, but it's at the back of the book, it's a long list of biography.
One person asks from Texas, says, thank you for Texas. Are there any artifacts left from Mírzá Mihdí?
Yes, 2, 3. One is when he was walking on the top of the roof, he was playing with 5 small stones. He had 5 stones. No, he was playing, but he had 5 small stones in his pocket. Then he had also a walking stick, a very fine walking stick, not on the roof of the tomb, but with his belongings. And third, his shirt. His shirt was retrieved. My understanding is that by Baha'u'lláh and Shoghi Effendi gave it to the National Assembly of Iraq at that time. So it may be now it's back in the International Archive in Haifa. I don't know that part of the story. But 3 pieces of relics have been left from Mírzá Mihdí.
You mentioned the covenant breakers who were in Akká. Perhaps you could explain a little something about them and why they were there.
Because in the edict, in the edict by the Sultan, there were 2 people who were sort of adversaries, enemies of Baha'u'lláh, living in Adrianople at the time. So the Sultan, he was so what's the word? So bad that he put these people to act in the ship and in the group as a spies to report what Baha'u'lláh, to report that actually Baha'u'lláh was under strict confinement, and to collaborate with the authorities that any Baha'i that came from Iran had to be expelled or detained. So it was a sort of tactic from the Sultan to create suspicious, to make sure that he got the feedback of what's happening on the ground.
And there were several Baha'is who were sent to Cyprus with Sobh Azal as well for theoretically the same reason, but of course they wouldn't stay on Cyprus and they got off the island as fast as they could and they went to Akká. So
that's right.
Including, I think that would included Meshkin Galam actually, or
Meshkin Galam went to Cyprus, but then he acquired the British citizenship, I believe, and he was allowed to leave and went to Akká. But when he arrived to Akká, Baha'u'lláh was out of the barracks.
We have one more question here. Do we know the name of the soldier who relayed the news to the governor? Did he come to respect Baha'u'lláh in time? I'm interested in understanding an outsider's perspective on this incident.
No, there is no name left. Probably, I mean, in the future, historians are going to look at the local data, local archive, local record. I doubt it that there is something there because we already went through it. But you never know, in history, things suddenly comes up.
That's right. Does the faith own any part of the barracks or own the cells where the Holy Family were imprisoned?
No, the answer is no. It's all property of the Israeli government. It's a public building. But the Baha'u'llah cell is not public access. All the barracks are public access, you know. Any tourist can go, but the Baha'u'llah cell is under key. So if you want to visit Baha'u'llah cells, you need to be officially a pilgrim of the Baha'i World Center. And then you will be guided one day and access and say prayers at this cell. Other than that, nobody is allowed to.
Mm-hmm. One other question here. Do we know the size of the Baha'i community in Akká, say later on, maybe the 1890s or something, towards the end of Baha'u'llah's life?
No, I cannot answer that question. They came little by little. They start to settle there. Then Abdul Baha was the head of the faith. I presume there were more Baha'is living there, settling, when Abdul Baha was there.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much the end of the questions there. And of course, there is one more question. That's what's the name of your book? So perhaps we should give that again one more time to wrap up our discussion for the evening, which has now gone a little more than an hour and a half. Which is
the book. Now you caught me on surprise because I don't have the book now. But I got here is the book in Spanish, right? So the book is in English. It's published by George Ronald. The name is Mírzá Mihdí, The Purest Branch. But this has been released in Spanish version. And we are looking for the Persian version sometimes this year. It has been finalized, has been approved by the National Assembly of the United States, the translation. So we are in the process of getting into the publication stage. But for the people in Spanish, you can get it from the Baha'i Publishing Trust in Spain. And for the
English, you said, was it at Amazon?
I always have it in my shelf, but this time, here it is. All right, so this is the book, Mírzá Mihdí, The Purest Branch. The bibliography is at the end. all the original sources. Plus, you can see also the original tablet from Baha'u'lláh to Mírzá Mihdí that was provided by the Baha'i World Center, and another original tablets. So Amazon.com.
Very good. Thank you again, Boris. This was a fantastic presentation, a fascinating glimpse into the life of Baha'u'lláh and of his family in the barracks and the time leading up to the barracks. And we're all in your debt for giving us this chance to sort of experience it in a little tiny bit, the life of the manifestation of God. So I want to thank you again, and I want to thank again our audience, and wish everyone a happy day or evening, depending on where you are on the planet. And we look forward to seeing you again next month with our next web. Goodbye, good day, good night, everyone.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.